So now that you know who I am and why this is so important to me, let's talk about this whole idea of lateral violence. First and foremost, if you go look at your personnel policies, I'd be willing to bet if there's a policy that references lateral violence, they're going to say that there's 3 different types of lateral violence. Harassment is one of them. Discrimination is the second, and bullying is the third. Now, those are very specific legal definitions, but we know that it's way more personal than that. What I'm talking about is the lateral violence that we experience in our families, in our homes, in our communities, and yes, even in our office places. So I came up with a definition, and this is mine and mine alone, and you can feel free to argue it. In fact, in the homework, you're going to get a chance to rate your own. So if you don't like it, you get to change it. That's empowering. I have it written on the screen just behind my camera here. So if you see me looking off in the distance, I'm not ignoring you. I just want to make sure I get the exact wording right. So when we put the text on the screen, I won't confuse you. So here is my definition of lateral violence. Passive or aggressive words or actions delivered by someone you know, love, or trust, intended to discourage you from advancing. Let's try that again. Passive or aggressive words or actions delivered by someone you know, love, or trust, intended to discourage you from advancing. Now that's a big, long definition, so let's look at the parts. I mentioned that the words or actions could be passive. Well, when I decided to go to college and I was going to be the first one in my family to do that, my mom, out of sheer love and concern, simply said, "You sure you want to do that?" Believe it or not, that's lateral violence in its passive form. It had me stop in my tracks, and suddenly I went from excited to going away to college to, is this something I really want to do? Is this a lot scarier than I think? Mom's nervous. My mom's the bravest woman in the world. Why would she be nervous? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. To see how it almost held me back? That's lateral violence. Or it's aggressive. Being told you can't do that. You're never going to be allowed to do that. Why do you think you have the ability? Why do you think they're going to hire you? Why would anyone read your book? Sadly, I've heard them all. Why lateral violence is so devastating is because those words or actions are delivered by someone you know, someone you love, or someone you trust. This is not the unknown troll on the internet making a comment. That's not lateral violence. Lateral violence is someone right next to you at the same level, your partner, your parents, your elder in your community, because we've all been trained in lateral violence. As Indigenous people, we have a master's in lateral violence. So we shouldn't be surprised when we run into it. That doesn't mean it's right. It has to be changed. That's the reason we're doing this course. But it is most definitely common. And the greatest indicator, or the hint that you should recognize this is lateral violence, is that it's intended to discourage you from advancing. So someone trying to talk you out of bidding for that new job, going away to college, trying that diet, going to that new restaurant that you've never been to before and it's an upscale restaurant and they're trying to say you don't belong there. Do you see how this is very limiting? Lateral violence is incredibly discouraging, and that's why it's so important we educate ourselves on it and overcome it. What you have to keep in mind, the closer the relationship, the more impact the lateral violence is going to have. If it's an aunt that you haven't seen in ages who says something, sure, it might catch you off guard, but you're going to dismiss that a lot more than the man or woman you love saying, why do you think they're going to hire you? Do you see what I mean? It is still lateral violence, which means it's not based in fact. It's training, unfortunately, and we're going to look at that so you truly understand it by the end of this course. Now, why is this so prevalent in Indigenous communities? Why is it in every family, every home, every community? Well, truth be told, the more marginalized the group, the greater the chance of lateral violence. Marginalized, pushed off to the margins, oppressed, held down. The more oppressed or marginalized the group, the greater chance of lateral violence. I would go as far as saying in Canada, historically and in present time, no one has been marginalized more than Indigenous people. We have been oppressed for so long, we've internalized it, and a characteristic of internalized oppression is lateral violence. So as Indigenous people, what I'm saying is don't be surprised there's lateral violence in your community, in your home, or even in your office. We should be celebrating when there isn't, because we've all been trained to do this. The reality is Canadian history has resulted in a victim mentality for so many Indigenous people. Why bother trying? They're never going to let us do it. It's a learned helplessness and a learned judgment. No one judges Indigenous people more effectively than Indigenous people. And that's lateral violence.